Hello, General Biology, and welcome to the fourth in the Screenscast series for Section 2.3 and Chapter 2, and we're talking about carbon compounds, and we were looking at macromolecules. I have to share a little story with you here. I was recording this, I was all the way to the end and realized that my mic wasn't hooked in, so this is the second time I'm starting this. So, we were just talking about nucleic acids, and I want to just say a couple of other things about those nucleic acids because they are so important. And as I said, a chapter is dedicated to them. But I want to look at what makes up a polynucleotide or the nucleic acid, because this is like the biggest molecule in your body. And it's the most important because it's your genetics. Every feature that you have, this DNA is responsible for. So we talked about there's two different kinds of nucleic acids. There's ribonucleic acid, which we call RNA, and there's deoxyribonucleic acid, which we call DNA. And there's some differences. DNA is going to be a double-stranded molecule, meaning it has two sides, and we're going to see that in just a minute. And it also has deoxyribose as its sugar. And as far as the nitrogen bases are concerned, it has adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine as the nitrogenous bases that make it up. Now, RNA is a little bit different. One, it's a single-stranded molecule. It has the sugar ribose instead of deoxyribose. It contains 4 bases. It contains adenine, guanine, cytosine, and uracil. It doesn't have thymine. And another difference is there are 3 different kinds of RNA. And RNA is going to serve as a messenger. It's going to copy the DNA message to make the proteins. So it's the helper. It's going to assist in getting the directions to where they need to go. But let's take a look. I have to do a little disconnecting here of my Surface Pro. Okay. And hopefully I won't log anything out or lose anything. So, alright. So, as far as the nucleic acids are concerned, I want to draw what a nucleic acid would look like. And I'm not an artist, so bear with me. So, the phosphate group. Every time we see a phosphate group, it's going to be represented by a circle. It is chemically combined with a sugar, a pentose sugar, a 5-carbon sugar, and then it has some kind of base attached to it. So the sugar, the phosphate group, and the base make up what we call a nucleotide. Ooh, this isn't working. Nucleotide. All right. So your DNA is going to be a double strand of nucleotides. So we're going to have another phosphate group here. It's going to be attached to a sugar. And then you're going to have another kind of base that it is attached to. So another nucleotide. We're going to have another phosphate group, another sugar, and let me just change this up a little bit, and another base. Okay, I'm running out of space, so I'm only going to do 3 nucleotides on this side. So since it's a double-stranded molecule, on the other side, you're going to have your sugar. And I'll explain in a different chapter why the sugar is drawn upside down on this one. And then the nitrogen base is going to kind of be the puzzle piece that fits in. So a phosphate, we're going to have our sugar, and then we're going to have the other base, and then a phosphate, the sugar, and then the other base, and then another phosphate. Okay? This is a double strand, and this would make up DNA. If this was adenine, then this is thymine. If this was guanine, then this is cytosine, cytosine, and guanine. And the base pairs are going to pair together, and it's going to be those A's, the T's, the C's, and the G's that are going to determine the physical traits that you have, that we can see, and how your body is going to function. All right, so that's a brief little thing on DNA and RNA. Really important, major macromolecules that contain the genetic code. All right, that genetic code, the A's, the G's, the T's, and the C's, makes proteins. And you can see I've been through this already because I've marked it up. So proteins are also macromolecules. They are going to contain nitrogen, and of course they're going to have that carbon, because that's the backbone of macromolecules, hydrogen and oxygen. And what proteins do is they are actually polymers themselves of tiny molecules called amino acids. And amino acids, I have a great story that I'm going to share with you. I think is interesting because we want to make biology interesting, right? So amino acids are what makes up the proteins, and the types of amino acids will determine the types of proteins. So I often say amino acids are like letters of the alphabet. You know, we have A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and so on. Well, we have different kinds of amino acids. There's actually 20 different kinds of amino acids. And when you arrange them together, just like we arrange our letters, you get a word in the DNA language. And that word is going to be used to build a protein, to make a protein, just like our words are used to make a sentence. Okay? So the idea for proteins is we've got lots of different jobs that proteins do. One of them is controlling the rate of reactions. We're going to see this in a lab. We've got specialized enzymes that we'll be talking about at the end of this chapter. And enzymes help cellular activities go on. A lot of cellular activities require heat, and we know that heat is deadly to living systems. So there's specialized proteins called enzymes that lower the amount of heat that's needed for reactions to happen. So proteins make those enzymes. They regulate the cell processes. So here we go, DNA. It contains the directions that will regulate the cellular activities that happen in your cells. So that's another job of the proteins. They're going to form cellular structures. We've got proteins embedded in our cell membrane that help give that cell membrane structure. So we need that. They transport substances in or out of the cells. I've got this cool video, and you're going to see something called a motor protein, and you have them in your cells, and you're going to think, oh, that looks like a little person in there. And he's just trucking along. He's moving vesicles, and he's using microtubules to move these vesicles along so that it can transport things into the cell and out of the cell. So we've got these really cool little motor proteins inside our cells. And then they also help to fight disease. So proteins, as you can tell by the jobs, they're really important. And the directions to make those proteins are contained within the DNA. So let's take a look at our proteins. As I said, they're made up of amino acids. And amino acids are made up of smaller chemical compounds that they're not totally monomers, but they are a compound that comes together. And one of the compounds that does come together is something called an amino group. And an amino group has the chemical formula NH2. So whenever we see, if I were to put a chemical formula, or actually a chemical structure down, and you saw that it had one N and two H's, like we're seeing here, that's an amino group, and that tends to make you think that, oh, this is going to be an amino acid. There's also something called a carboxyl group, COOH, that's at the other end that we have. So here's our carboxyl group, C, and then 2 O's and our H. And carboxyl groups are characteristics of acids. Anytime you see COOH in a formula, in a chemical structure, you know that that is going to be an acid. Okay, so that's an indicator of an acid. So when we take a look at amino acids, they have the amino group, they have the carboxyl group, so our amino group, our carboxyl group, and then see this spot right here with the R? That is called a variable. And if you were to look on the periodic table of elements, there's no R by itself. There's RU, there's R with another letter, but there's no R's by itself. And that means that that's a variable. And a variable, as we learned, is something that changes. So when we have this variable here change, it's going to change the type of amino acid that we're going to have. So here we go. Here's our amino group. Here's our carboxyl group. And in the position of the variable, we have CH3. And with CH3 there, that makes this amino acid alanine. So here's another one. We know this is an amino group. We know this is a carboxyl group. And here we have CH2OH. And that variable now changes that amino acid to serine. Okay? So 2 different amino acids. We have a total of 20 different amino acids. And I'll be showing you those 20 different amino acids when we get into class, because it's kind of fun, and we'll be doing it again later on in a different chapter. So if we were to join this amino acid together with this amino acid, there would be a peptide bond that forms in between those two. And because we have 2 or more amino acids together, this becomes known as a polypeptide. And polypeptides are pieces of proteins. Okay, so all amino acids are identical in the amino acids and the carboxyl group. So we're going to always see this amino group, always see this carboxyl group. They differ by that variable. They differ between whatever this variable is going to be here or here. And there's 20 different combinations that you can get. When you have 2 amino acids or 3 amino acids joined together, the bond that forms between 2 amino acids is always called a peptide bond. That's the type of bond. And when we get a chain of amino acids, we get a polypeptide. And polypeptides make the proteins. So as I said to you, there are more than 20 different amino acids that are found in nature. And the variety of putting these in different orders comes up with the diversity that you see within all of the life that you see on Earth, from plants to insects to animals and so forth. So my story is, and I always share this story, and this was in one of the textbooks that I used when I first started out teaching back in the Stone Ages. And there was a gentleman, and you know that I'm not good with names, but somehow I remember this guy's name, by the name of Cyril Panaparuma. Oh, and look at the time. You know what? Let me tell you about Cyril on the next screencast. Sorry to keep you in limbo, but we'll see you in just a few minutes.